A fresh start. In a bustling neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia, where the sounds of laughter and music filled the air, 32-year-old Maya Johnson was determined to carve out a new life for herself. After years of working multiple jobs to support her 2 children, she had finally saved enough money to move into a modest apartment. It was a fresh start. A chance to escape the cycle of poverty that had plagued her family for generations. Maya was proud of her accomplishments. She had recently completed her degree in social work, driven by a desire to help others navigate the challenges she had faced herself. With her newfound education, she hoped to secure a stable job that would allow her to provide for her children and create a better future for them. The apartment she had rented was far from luxurious, but it was clean and safe. Everything she had hoped for. Located in a diverse community, it was filled with families from various backgrounds. Maya loved the vibrant atmosphere. Children played in the streets, while neighbors exchanged friendly greetings. It felt like home. However, there was one cloud hanging over her new beginning. Her landlord, Mr. Harold Thompson. A middle-aged man with a stern demeanor and an air of superiority, he had made it clear during their initial meeting that he expected his tenants to adhere strictly to his rules. Maya sensed an underlying tension in their interactions, but brushed it off as typical landlord-tenant dynamics. The first signs of trouble. As weeks passed, Maya settled into her routine, juggling work and parenting while trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy for her children. However, she began noticing small things that made her uneasy about Mr. Thompson. He would often drop by unannounced, checking on things in the apartment or making comments about how she maintained the property. "Make sure you keep your kids quiet," he once said curtly during one visit. "I don't want any complaints from the neighbors." Maya felt a knot tighten in her stomach at his words. She understood that landlords have responsibilities, but his tone felt condescending and controlling. Nevertheless, she tried to keep the peace. After all, she needed this apartment more than anything. The eviction notice one fateful afternoon, as Maya returned home from work, she found an envelope taped to her door. Her heart sank as she recognized Mr. Thompson's handwriting. With trembling hands, she opened it and read the eviction notice inside. "Dear Ms. Johnson," it began coldly. "Due to repeated complaints about noise levels coming from your unit and failure to adhere to lease agreements, you are hereby given notice to vacate this property within 30 days. Maya felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under her. She couldn't believe what she was reading. There had been no previous warnings or discussions about any issues with noise or behavior. Her children were well behaved. They played quietly after school and did their homework diligently. The confrontation. Furious and hurt, Maya decided to confront Mr. Thompson directly. She gathered her thoughts as she walked down the street toward his office, a small space adjacent to the apartment building where he managed several rental properties. When she arrived, Mr. Thompson sat behind his desk with an air of indifference. "What can I do for you?" he asked without looking up from his paperwork. "I received your eviction notice," Maya said firmly but respectfully. "I'd like to understand why you're evicting me without any prior warnings." Finally looking up at her with an expression that seemed both annoyed and dismissive, he replied, "We've had complaints about noise coming from your unit. I have a responsibility to keep my other tenants happy." Maya felt anger bubbling inside her as she fought back tears. "I've done everything right. My kids are not causing any problems," she insisted. Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair with an air of superiority that made Maya's skin crawl. "It's not just about you," he said dismissively. "You need to understand that I run a business here." The racist undertones. As their conversation continued, Maya couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more at play than just complaints about noise. She sensed an undercurrent of racism in his tone, an implication that somehow being a black woman with children made her less deserving of respect or consideration. "Is this really about noise?" she pressed further, trying to remain composed despite the overwhelming emotions threatening to spill over. Mr. Thompson's expression hardened as he replied curtly, "You can take this up with your lawyer if you want, but I'm not changing my mind." Maya left his office feeling defeated, yet determined. She knew she couldn't let this man dictate her life or uproot her family without a fight. Seeking help. That evening, after putting her children to bed, Maya sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, searching for legal resources and support groups for tenants facing eviction. She needed guidance on how to navigate this situation and protect her rights as a tenant. After hours of research and phone calls, she found a local organization dedicated to helping individuals facing housing discrimination and eviction issues. They offered free legal consultations and resources for tenants who needed assistance navigating disputes with landlords. Feeling a glimmer of hope amidst despair, Maya scheduled an appointment for the following week. She knew that fighting back would require strength and determination, but she was ready to stand up for herself and her family. Preparing for battle. As days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted. Maya balanced work responsibilities while preparing for what lay ahead, gathering evidence of her good standing as a tenant while documenting any interactions with Mr. Thompson. She spoke with neighbors who could vouch for her character, as well as other tenants who had experienced similar issues with their landlord, realizing they too felt powerless against him. With each passing day, her resolve strengthened. No longer would she allow fear dictate how she lived. The day before the eviction deadline approached, a tense atmosphere settled over Maya's home. Uncertainty loomed large, but so did determination. "I won't let him win," she whispered softly into the night while preparing documents needed for tomorrow's meeting. The day of reckoning. The day of reckoning arrived, and Maya felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach as she prepared to confront Mr. Thompson once more. She had spent the previous night gathering her thoughts, reviewing her notes, and mentally rehearsing what she wanted to say. Today was not just about defending her home. It was about standing up for herself and her children. After dropping her kids off at school, Maya took a deep breath and headed to Mr. Thompson's office. She was determined to approach this meeting with confidence, armed with the knowledge she had gained from her research and the support she had received from the local tenant advocacy group. Arriving at the office, as she walked into the small office space, she was greeted by the familiar sight of Mr. Thompson sitting behind his desk, his expression unreadable as he glanced up from his paperwork. The air felt thick with tension as Maya approached him. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she said firmly. "I'd like to discuss the eviction notice you issued." He looked at her with a mixture of annoyance and irritation. "What more is there to discuss? You've already received your notice." Maya steadied herself, recalling the advice she had received from the advocacy group. "I believe I'm entitled to a conversation about this matter," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. The confrontation begins. Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively. "I don't have time for this," he said dismissively. "You're causing problems in my building, and I need to protect my other tenants." "Problems?" Maya echoed incredulously. "I haven't done anything wrong. I've been a good tenant, paying my rent on time, keeping my apartment clean, and raising my children in a safe environment." He scoffed at her words. "You can't expect me to ignore complaints just because you think you're doing everything right." Maya's frustration mounted as she realized he was unwilling to listen. "What complaints? You've never brought any issues to my attention before this eviction notice." The weight of assumptions. As their conversation continued, Maya felt an overwhelming sense of injustice wash over her. It was clear that Mr. Thompson had made assumptions about her based on her race and socioeconomic status, assumptions that had led him to treat her with disdain rather than respect. "Let me remind you," Maya said firmly, "that I have rights as a tenant. You can't evict me without proper cause or due process." Mr. Thompson's expression hardened as he leaned forward slightly. "I can do what I need to protect my property," he said coldly. Maya took a deep breath, determined not to back down. "You may have power as a landlord," she replied, "but I have rights that protect me from discrimination and unjust eviction." The turning point. At that moment something shifted within Maya, a surge of strength fueled by her desire to fight for herself and her children. She recalled the stories shared by other tenants who had faced similar struggles. Their resilience inspired her to stand firm. "I'm not going anywhere," she declared boldly. "I will fight this eviction, and I will seek legal counsel if necessary." Mr. Thompson's eyes narrowed. Ash regarded her with disdain. "Do what you want," he sneered, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice now. Maya felt empowered by her words. She knew that standing up for herself was not just about this eviction. It was about challenging systemic injustices that affected so many people like her. Seeking support. After leaving Mr. Thompson's office, Maya felt a mix of emotions, anger at how she had been treated, but also a sense of empowerment for standing up for herself. She immediately contacted the local tenant advocacy group again to discuss her next steps. During their conversation, they provided valuable information about tenant rights and how to navigate the eviction process effectively. They encouraged Maya to document everything, keeping records of communication with Mr. Thompson and gathering evidence that demonstrated her good standing as a tenant. "Remember," one of the advocates said reassuringly, "you're not alone in this fight. Many people have faced similar situations and come out stronger on the other side." Rallying her community feeling bolstered by their support, Maya decided it was time to rally her community around this issue. She reached out to neighbors who had expressed their own grievances about Mr. Thompson's management style. Many shared stories of feeling marginalized or mistreated. Maya organized a small meeting at a local community center where residents could come together to discuss their experiences and brainstorm ways they could collectively advocate for better treatment from their landlord. As attendees gathered, the room buzzed with energy filled with voices eager to share concerns. "I've been living here for years," one neighbor stated passionately during introductions, "and I've seen too many good families get pushed out because of unfair practices." Another resident chimed in, "We need to stand together. If we don't speak up now, we'll continue facing these issues alone." Building solidarity. Maya listened intently as each person shared their story, realizing that they were all connected by common struggles against an unjust system. "We can't let fear hold us back any longer," Maya urged passionately, after hearing several stories filled with frustration. "We need unity," someone shouted from the back, a sentiment echoed throughout those gathered. As discussions continued, the group began brainstorming strategies for addressing their concerns directly with Mr. Thompson, while also exploring potential legal avenues available for tenants facing eviction or discrimination. A collective voice. By the end of the evening, Maya felt invigorated. They had formed a coalition dedicated not only toward fighting against injustices faced by individual tenants, but also advocating for systemic change within their community. They agreed to draft a letter outlining their collective grievances while requesting an official meeting with Mr. Thompson, where they could address these issues directly. "We deserve better treatment," Maya declared confidently as they wrapped up discussions filled with determination. With newfound solidarity surrounding them, she felt empowered, knowing that together they could challenge oppressive systems while demanding respect, dignity. Preparing for battle. In the following days, Maya worked diligently alongside fellow residents, drafting letters outlining their concerns, while preparing for what lay ahead, a confrontation with Mr. Thompson, where they would collectively voice their demands. She took care to document every interaction meticulously, while gathering evidence, highlighting how many families had faced similar challenges under his management. As tensions mounted, the day finally arrived when they would present their case directly before him. Uncertainty loomed large, but so did determination. "I won't let him win," Maya whispered softly into the night while preparing documents needed for tomorrow's meeting. preparing for the meeting. The night before the meeting with Mr. Thompson, Maya sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by documents and notes. She had spent hours organizing her thoughts and gathering evidence to support her case. The eviction notice lay in front of her, a stark reminder of the battle she was about to face. Maya felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She knew that this confrontation was not just about her eviction. It represented a larger struggle against systemic racism and discrimination that many in her community faced. As she reviewed her notes, she reminded herself of the support she had received from her neighbors and the advocacy group. They were counting on her to stand strong. With her children asleep in the next room, Maya took a moment to breathe deeply and visualize the outcome she wanted. She imagined herself speaking confidently, articulating her points clearly, and standing firm against Mr. Thompson's dismissive attitude. "I can do this," she whispered to herself. The meeting day. The following morning, Maya dressed carefully, choosing a professional outfit that made her feel empowered. She wanted to convey that she was serious about this meeting and ready to advocate for herself. After dropping her children off at school, she made her way to Mr. Thompson's office with a sense of purpose. As she entered his office, a small, cluttered space filled with paperwork, Maya felt a wave of apprehension wash over her. Mr. Thompson was already seated behind his desk, his expression unreadable as he glanced up from his computer. "Ms. Johnson," he said curtly, barely looking at her, "you're right on time." "I appreciate you meeting with me today," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tension in the room. Setting the tone. Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed defensively. "Let's get straight to the point," he said dismissively. "You received your eviction notice, and I'm not changing my mind." Maya took a deep breath, recalling all the advice she had received from the advocacy group about remaining calm and collected during confrontations like this one. "I'd like to discuss that eviction notice," she began firmly but respectfully. "I believe it was issued without proper cause." He scoffed at her words. "You've been causing disturbances in my building," he retorted sharply. "I have a responsibility to my other tenants." Presenting her case. Maya felt anger rising within her but fought to maintain composure. "With all due respect, Mr. Thompson," she said, "I have not received any prior complaints about noise or behavior from you or any other tenants." She pulled out a folder filled with documentation, emails exchanged between herself and Mr. Thompson regarding maintenance requests, notes from neighbors who had offered their support, and even records of timely rent payments. "I've been a good tenant," she continued, placing the folder on his desk for him to see. "I have evidence that contradicts your claims." Mr. Thompson glanced at the folder but quickly dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "This is irrelevant," he said dismissively. The emotional toll. Maya felt frustration boiling inside her as she realized he was unwilling to engage in a meaningful conversation. "This isn't just about me. It's about how tenants are treated in this community," she pressed on passionately. "People like you think you can take advantage of landlords," he shot back, his tone dripping with disdain. Maya felt a sharp sting at his words. They echoed the racist undertones that had characterized their interactions since day one. "What do you mean by people like me?" she asked pointedly. Mr. Thompson leaned forward slightly, his expression hardening as he replied coldly, "You know exactly what I mean." Standing her ground. In that moment, something shifted within Maya. A surge of determination, fueled by anger and indignation at being treated unfairly because of her race and socioeconomic status. She realized that this confrontation was not just about defending herself. It was about challenging systemic injustices that affected so many others like her. "I refuse to accept this treatment," Maya declared firmly, feeling empowered by the support of her community behind her. "You cannot evict me based on assumptions or prejudice." Mr. Thompson's expression faltered for a moment as he processed her words. There was an unfamiliar flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. A turning point. Let me remind you, Maya continued boldly, that I have rights as a tenant protected by law against discrimination. She recited key points from tenant rights legislation that she had researched extensively. Mr. Thompson opened his mouth as if to argue, but then closed it again, caught off guard by Maya's confidence and knowledge. I expect you to reconsider this eviction notice, Maya concluded resolutely. If you refuse to do so, I will seek legal counsel and take further action. The silence in the room was palpable. Both Maya and Mr. Thompson were locked in an unspoken battle of wills. The aftermath. After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Thompson finally spoke again. I'll think about what you've said. His tone lacked conviction, but also revealed a hint of uncertainty. Maya stood up straight and nodded firmly before turning to leave his office, her heart racing with adrenaline mixed with relief at having stood up for herself. As she walked out into the fresh air outside, she felt lighter than before. Perhaps today marked not just another day struggling through life, but rather an opportunity for transformation, a chance for healing amidst shared experiences built upon kindness, compassion, rallying support. Once outside, Maya immediately called one of her neighbors who had been supportive throughout this ordeal, a fellow tenant named Lisa who had shared similar experiences with Mr. Thompson. I did it, Maya exclaimed breathlessly when Lisa answered the phone. What happened? Lisa asked eagerly. I confronted him about the eviction notice. I stood my ground and told him I wouldn't accept this treatment. That's amazing, Lisa cheered through the phone, her excitement palpable even over distance. I told him I'd seek legal help if necessary, and I gathered evidence showing how he's treated us unfairly, Maya continued proudly. You're so brave. We need more people like you standing up against these injustices, Lisa responded enthusiastically. A community united feeling invigorated by their conversation, Maya knew that this fight wasn't just hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had faced similar struggles within their community. As they spoke further, Lisa suggested organizing another meeting among tenants where they could discuss strategies for addressing their concerns collectively, while also sharing resources available through local advocacy groups. We need unity, Lisa urged passionately over the phone, a sentiment echoed throughout those gathered. Maya agreed wholeheartedly. Together they could challenge oppressive systems while demanding respect, dignity, rallying support, and taking action. The immediate reaction. After her confrontation with Mr. Thompson, Maya felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had stood up for herself and asserted her rights, but the looming threat of eviction still hung over her head like a dark cloud. As she walked back to her apartment, she couldn't shake off the feeling that this was just the beginning of a long battle. Once home, Maya gathered her children and sat them down to explain what had happened. I want you both to know that I'm fighting for our home, she said, trying to keep her tone reassuring. We may face some challenges, but we're going to get through this together. Her daughter, Zoe, looked up with wide eyes. Are we going to lose our home, Mom? No, Maya replied firmly. I'm doing everything I can to make sure we stay here. I want you both to feel safe and secure. Her son, Malik, nodded, but remained quiet, sensing the tension in the air. Maya wrapped her arms around them both, feeling grateful for their support during this difficult time. Reaching out for help. The next day, Maya reached out to the local tenant advocacy group again. They had been instrumental in providing her with resources and information about tenant rights. She explained the situation and asked for guidance on how to proceed. First and foremost, one of the advocates said over the phone, you need to document everything. Keep records of all communications with Mr. Thompson, emails, texts, notes from conversations. This will be crucial if you decide to take legal action. Maya took meticulous notes as they spoke, feeling empowered by their support. What else can I do? She asked eagerly. Consider organizing a meeting with other tenants who have faced similar issues, the advocate suggested. Strength in numbers can make a significant impact. Building a coalition. Inspired by this advice, Maya decided to call a meeting with her neighbors that very evening. She reached out to Lisa and several other families in the building who had expressed concerns about Mr. Thompson's management style. As evening approached, Maya set up chairs in her living room, transforming it into a makeshift meeting space. When everyone arrived, she could feel a sense of solidarity among them. They were all united by a common goal: standing up against unfair treatment. "Thank you all for coming," Maya began as she looked around at their faces, some familiar, others new, but all sharing a sense of purpose. "I know many of us have faced issues with Mr. Thompson, and I want us to come together to discuss how we can support each other." Sharing experiences. One by one, tenants began sharing their experiences with Mr. Thompson. Stories filled with frustration and anger at how they had been treated. A single mother spoke about being threatened with eviction for minor lease violations that were never clearly communicated. "I feel like he targets us because we're vulnerable," she said tearfully. "It's not right." Another tenant chimed in. "I've lived here for years without any problems until he started cracking down on everyone. It feels like he's trying to push us out." Maya listened intently as each person shared their story. It became clear that they were not alone in their struggles. This was a systemic issue affecting many families in their building. Formulating a plan. After everyone had shared their experiences, Maya took charge of the discussion again. "We need to take action," she said decisively. "Let's draft a letter outlining our grievances and request a formal meeting with Mr. Thompson where we can address these issues collectively." The group nodded in agreement. There was a palpable sense of determination in the room. "We should also consider reaching out to local media," Lisa suggested thoughtfully. "If we can raise awareness about what's happening here, it might pressure him into changing his behavior." Maya felt encouraged by this idea. Shining a light on their situation could be an effective strategy for holding Mr. Thompson accountable. Drafting the letter. Over the next hour, the group worked together to draft a letter that clearly outlined their concerns regarding Mr. Thompson's management practices and requested a meeting to discuss these issues directly. Maya took charge of writing, while others contributed ideas and edits, each person adding their voice to ensure that everyone felt represented in the final document. Once completed, the letter was signed by all attendees as a show of unity, a powerful testament that they were standing together against injustice. Delivering the letter. The following day, Maya gathered everyone again outside Mr. Thompson's office, ready to deliver their letter. As they stood together, she felt an overwhelming sense of pride knowing they were taking this step collectively. With her heart pounding in her chest, Maya knocked on his office door firmly before entering alongside her neighbors who stood behind her for support. Mr. Thompson looked up from his desk with surprise as he saw them all gathered together. His expression shifted from indifference to annoyance as he realized what was happening. "What is this?" he asked curtly as he glanced at the letter Maya held out toward him. "This is our formal request for a meeting," she replied confidently, while keeping eye contact steady. The response. Mr. Thompson took the letter reluctantly before scanning its contents quickly. His expression darkened as he read through their grievances. "You think you can just band together like this?" he retorted incredulously after finishing. "We are tired of being treated unfairly," one neighbor interjected boldly. "You have no right to evict anyone without proper cause," another added passionately. Maya felt emboldened by their words, realizing that they were no longer just individuals facing oppression, but rather a collective force demanding respect. A moment of defiance. As tensions mounted, the atmosphere grew charged. Maya could see uncertainty flickering across Mr. Thompson's face. "I'll consider your request for a meeting," he finally muttered dismissively before turning back toward his desk. But before he could dismiss them further, Maya spoke up once more. We deserve better treatment than this. We will not be silenced or pushed out." With those words hanging in the air, the group turned on their heels and left his office feeling victorious despite uncertainty still looming large. Rallying support from others. In the days following this confrontation, Maya continued rallying support from other tenants while keeping communication open among those who had signed their letter. They began organizing community meetings regularly where residents could share updates while discussing strategies aimed at holding Mr. Thompson accountable. As word spread throughout neighboring buildings, more families joined forces eager to contribute toward positive change within housing practices affecting them all. The media attention. Eventually, their collective efforts caught media attention after local reporters learned about ongoing struggles tenants faced under Mr. Thompson's management. A news crew arrived one afternoon, ready to interview residents willing to share stories highlighting injustices experienced firsthand while shedding light on broader issues surrounding housing discrimination. Maya felt nervous, yet excited knowing that this platform could amplify their voices while raising awareness about systemic racism within rental practices. The narrative quickly shifted from an isolated incident to a community-wide conversation about systemic racism and the treatment of renters. As interviews unfolded, she spoke passionately about what had transpired since moving into her apartment while emphasizing importance community solidarity. "We need change," she declared fervently during one interview segment. "No family should live in fear of eviction simply because they're being targeted unfairly." A growing movement. As media coverage increased, their story resonated widely, prompting discussions surrounding tenant rights across various communities throughout Atlanta. People began sharing similar experiences online, using hashtags like #JusticeForTenants, while advocating for better protections against discrimination within rental agreements. Maya felt invigorated, knowing that what started as an isolated incident had transformed into something larger, a movement aimed at creating lasting change within housing policies affecting marginalized individuals everywhere. The impact of media coverage. As news of Maya's confrontation with her landlord spread, it caught the attention of local media outlets. Reporters began covering the story, highlighting not only Maya's struggle but also the broader issues of housing discrimination and tenant rights in Atlanta. Maya found herself at the center of this media storm. Interviews poured in from various news stations, eager to hear her story. She felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as she prepared to share her experiences with a wider audience. This was an opportunity not just for herself, but for all those who had faced similar injustices. A powerful interview. One afternoon, Maya sat down for an interview with a local news anchor. The studio was bright, with cameras focused on her as she spoke about her experience. "I never thought I would be in this position," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "All I wanted was a safe place for my children to grow up." The anchor nodded empathetically. "What do you hope to achieve by sharing your story?" "I want people to understand that this isn't just about me," Maya replied passionately. "It's about everyone who has been treated unfairly because of their race or socioeconomic status. We need to hold landlords accountable and ensure that everyone has access to safe housing." Community solidarity. As Maya's story gained traction, community members began rallying around her cause. Local organizations dedicated to housing rights reached out, offering support and resources. They organized meetings where residents could come together to discuss their rights and learn how to advocate for themselves. At one such meeting, held at a community center, Maya stood before a crowd of concerned residents, eager to learn more about their rights as tenants. "We need to be informed," she urged them. "Knowledge is power, and together we can fight against discrimination." The room was filled with nods of agreement. People shared their own stories of mistreatment by landlords and expressed gratitude for Maya's courage in speaking out. Organizing a rally. Inspired by the growing momentum, Maya and her neighbors decided to organize a rally in support of tenant rights. They wanted to raise awareness about housing discrimination and demand better protections for renters in their community. Maya took charge of planning the event, reaching out to local advocacy groups, community leaders, and even some sympathetic politicians who had expressed interest in supporting their cause. Flyers were distributed throughout the neighborhood, inviting residents to join them for a day of solidarity. "Let's make our voices heard," Maya proclaimed during one planning meeting. "We need to show that we won't stand for injustice any longer." The day of the rally. The day of the rally arrived, and excitement buzzed through the air as families gathered at the town square. Banners reading, "Justice for Tenants" and "Housing is a Right" adorned the area, creating a vibrant atmosphere filled with hope and determination. Maya stood at the front of the crowd alongside Chief Anderson, who had come to show his support for their cause. As they prepared to address the attendees, Maya felt a surge of pride, knowing that this event represented not just her fight, but the collective struggle of many families facing similar challenges. "Thank you all for being here today," Chief Anderson began, his voice resonating through the square. "We are committed to working together with our community members to ensure that everyone has access to safe and affordable housing." A collective voice. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she stepped up confidently before the microphone, her heart racing with anticipation. "Today we stand united against injustice," she declared passionately as cheers erupted from the crowd. "This isn't just my fight, it's our fight," she continued fervently. "We are here because we believe in equality, because we believe that everyone deserves respect." As she spoke, Maya noticed faces in the crowd filled with determination. Many were nodding along while others raised their fists in solidarity. "We will not be silenced," she shouted passionately. "We will demand change until every family feels safe in their home." The power of community. The energy in the square was electric as attendees joined in chanting slogans calling for justice. Neighbors hugged one another, while children waved handmade signs, creating an atmosphere brimming with hope. As speakers continued sharing their stories, the crowd grew larger. People from surrounding neighborhoods joined them, drawn by the powerful message resonating throughout Atlanta. Maya felt invigorated knowing that they were making an impact, not just within their own community but beyond. Media coverage expands. Local news crews arrived at the rally capturing footage while interviewing attendees about why they were there. Cameras panned across passionate faces filled with determination, broadcasting their message far beyond what they could have imagined. Maya was interviewed again amidst cheers from fellow supporters surrounding her. "This is about more than just me. It's about ensuring that no one else has to go through what I did," she stated firmly into the camera. Her words resonated deeply within viewers. They sparked conversations surrounding tenant rights across social media platforms. A growing movement. As days turned into weeks, the movement continued gaining momentum. More individuals began sharing their own stories, sparking discussions, advocating for empathy, understanding among diverse groups everywhere. Maya knew that this journey was far from over. There would always be work left undone, but she felt optimistic knowing they were moving forward together, united under shared goals, striving toward equity, justice. In those moments filled with connection, warmth, camaraderie, a powerful lesson emerged. Sometimes it takes one person willing to stand up against adversity, inspire others, find strength within themselves too. Preparing for legal action. While community support flourished, the threat of eviction still loomed large over Maya's head. She knew that they needed a solid legal strategy if they wanted to fight back effectively against Mr. Thompson. With assistance from tenant advocacy groups, Maya began preparing for potential legal action while gathering evidence documenting all interactions with him. She spent hours compiling records detailing every communication exchanged between herself and Mr. Thompson, including emails, texts, notes from conversations, all aimed at demonstrating how he had failed to fulfill his responsibilities as a landlord. Seeking legal counsel. After weeks spent gathering information, Maya finally secured an appointment with a local attorney specializing in housing law. As she entered his office, a mix of nerves, excitement coursed through her veins. This meeting could determine their future. The attorney greeted her warmly before diving into questions regarding her situation. "Can you tell me more about what led up to your eviction notice?" Maya recounted everything, from initial interactions with Mr. Thompson leading up until now, emphasizing how his behavior had changed once he learned about her background. "I believe he's targeting me because I'm a black woman," she concluded firmly. The attorney nodded thoughtfully after listening intently. "It sounds like you have grounds for a strong case based on discrimination." A plan forward. With renewed hope, Maya discussed next steps regarding potential legal action while also exploring options available through local tenant advocacy organizations. "Together we can build a solid case against him," he assured her confidently. Feeling empowered by this support, Maya knew that they were on track toward seeking justice, not just for herself, but also for countless others who had faced similar struggles. Preparing for court. After securing legal representation, Maya felt a renewed sense of hope. The attorney, Mr. Harris, had extensive experience in housing law and was passionate about tenant rights. He assured her that they would build a strong case against Mr. Thompson, emphasizing the importance of documenting every interaction and gathering evidence. "Your experiences are valid," Mr. Harris said during their first meeting. "We will show that you've been treated unfairly and that this eviction is not just about noise complaints. It's rooted in discrimination." Maya nodded, feeling empowered by his words. She spent the next few days gathering all the necessary documents, emails, texts, and notes from conversations with Mr. Thompson. She also reached out to neighbors who had agreed to serve as witnesses, sharing their own experiences with the landlord. The court date approaches. As the court date approached, Maya felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She knew this was more than just a legal battle. It was a fight for dignity and respect, not only for herself, but for all tenants who had faced similar injustices. The night before the hearing, she gathered her children and sat them down. "I want you both to know how important this is," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We're standing up for what's right, and no matter what happens tomorrow, I'm proud of us." Zoe looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Are you scared, Mom?" "A little," Maya admitted honestly. "But I know we're doing the right thing, and that makes me strong." Malik nodded in agreement, his young face reflecting determination. "We believe in you, Mom." The day in court. The day of the hearing arrived, and Maya dressed carefully in professional attire that made her feel confident. She arrived at the courthouse early, her heart racing as she took in the imposing building, filled with people waiting for their cases to be heard. As she entered the courtroom, she spotted Mr. Thompson sitting at the plaintiff's table with a smug expression on his face. Beside him was his attorney, a sharp-dressed man who exuded an air of confidence. Maya took a deep breath as she approached her own table, where Mr. Harris was already reviewing documents. "You ready?" he asked with a reassuring smile. "I am," Maya replied firmly. The hearing begins. The judge entered the courtroom, and everyone rose to show respect as he took his seat. After introducing themselves, both sides presented their arguments. Mr. Thompson's attorney began by outlining his case. "My client has received numerous complaints regarding noise disturbances from Ms. Johnson's unit," he stated confidently. "As a result, he has no choice but to evict her to maintain peace among other tenants." Maya's heart sank as she listened to the familiar narrative being spun against her. But she knew this was just one side of the story. When it was Maya's turn to speak, Mr. Harris stood beside her as she took a deep breath and faced the judge directly. "Your Honor," Maya began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I have lived in this apartment for several months without any issues until I received an eviction notice out of nowhere." Presenting her evidence. She continued passionately, "I have always paid my rent on time and maintained my unit properly. The complaints about noise are unfounded. I believe they stem from bias against me as a black woman raising my children alone." Maya presented her evidence methodically, sharing emails between herself and Mr. Thompson while highlighting testimonies from neighbors who corroborated her claims about being a good tenant. "I have witnesses who can attest to my character," she said firmly, as she gestured toward her neighbors seated behind her. The judge listened intently as Maya laid out her case, her heart pounding but fueled by determination. The cross-examination. Next came the cross-examination by Mr. Thompson's attorney, who aimed to undermine Maya's credibility with pointed questions designed to provoke doubt. "Isn't it true that your children can be quite noisy at times?" he asked with a smirk. Maya felt anger rising within her but remained composed. "Children are naturally energetic," she replied confidently, "but they are not disruptive. We live our lives respectfully within our community." The attorney pressed further. "You've only lived here for a short time. How can you claim to understand your responsibilities as a tenant?" "I've lived in rentals before," Maya countered firmly, "and I know my rights as a tenant. This isn't about me being new. It's about being treated fairly." A moment of reflection. As the questioning continued, Maya felt empowered by each response she gave. She realized that this moment wasn't just about defending herself. It was about challenging systemic injustices affecting many families like hers. After several rounds of questioning, the judge called for a recess. Maya stepped outside into the hallway, where she took deep breaths, trying to calm herself down. Her neighbors gathered around offering words of encouragement. "You're doing great," Lisa said proudly. "We believe in you," another neighbor added enthusiastically. The verdict. After what felt like an eternity, the hearing resumed. Both sides presented their closing arguments before the judge retired to deliberate. Maya sat anxiously alongside Mr. Harris, waiting for news. Uncertainty loomed large, but so did hope. Finally, the judge returned to announce his decision. "After reviewing evidence presented by both parties, I find in favor of Ms. Johnson." A wave of relief washed over Maya as cheers erupted from those gathered in support behind her. "I'm grateful for this outcome," she said tearfully as tears streamed down her cheeks. The community celebration. In the days following the ruling, Maya's victory became a rallying point for tenants across Atlanta. News outlets covered her story extensively, highlighting not only her individual triumph, but also raising awareness about systemic issues surrounding housing discrimination. Community members organized celebrations honoring Maya's courage while advocating for tenant rights throughout neighborhoods everywhere. At one such gathering held at a local park, families came together sharing food-laughter stories while celebrating unity among diverse groups. Maya stood before them feeling overwhelmed by gratitude, knowing that what started as an isolated incident had transformed into something larger, a movement aimed at creating lasting change within housing policies affecting marginalized individuals everywhere, reflecting on change. As she looked around at smiling faces filled with hope, Maya reflected on how far they had come together. This journey had taught her valuable lessons about resilience, solidarity, while empowering others facing similar struggles. "Today we celebrate not just my victory but our collective strength," she declared passionately during speeches given throughout festivities. "We have shown that when we stand together, we can challenge oppressive systems while demanding respect." "Dignity!" The crowd erupted into applause, neighbors hugging one another while children played, joyfully nearby, creating an atmosphere brimming with positivity. Looking ahead, with each passing day, the movement continued gaining momentum. More individuals began sharing their own stories, advocating for empathy, understanding among diverse groups everywhere. Maya knew that this journey was far from over. There would always be work left undone. But she felt optimistic knowing they were moving forward together, united under shared goals, striving toward equity justice. In those moments filled with connection, warmth, camaraderie. A powerful lesson emerged. Sometimes it takes one person willing to stand up against adversity, inspire others, find strength within themselves too. A legacy of change. In the weeks following her victory against Mr. Thompson, Maya Johnson found herself at the forefront of a movement that was reshaping the conversation around tenant rights in Atlanta. Her story had resonated with many, serving as a beacon of hope for those who had faced similar struggles. The media coverage continued to highlight her journey, and she was invited to speak at various events, sharing her experiences and advocating for systemic change. Maya felt a profound sense of purpose as she stepped into this new role. She had transformed from a tenant fighting for her home into a community leader advocating for justice and equality. With each speaking engagement, she inspired others to stand up for their rights and to challenge injustices they faced. Building community alliances. Recognizing the importance of collective action, Maya began forming alliances with local advocacy groups dedicated to housing rights. She collaborated with organizations that provided legal support and resources for tenants facing eviction or discrimination. Together, they organized workshops aimed at educating residents about their rights and empowering them to take action. At one workshop held at a community center, Maya stood before a group of eager participants ready to learn. "Knowledge is power," she said passionately. "The more we know about our rights, the better equipped we are to fight back against unfair treatment." Residents listened intently as she shared her story, the challenges she faced with Mr. Thompson and how she had navigated the eviction process. Many attendees nodded in agreement, recognizing parallels between their own experiences and Maya's journey. Empowering others. As Maya continued her advocacy work, she focused on empowering others to share their stories as well. She encouraged residents to speak out about their experiences with landlords who had mistreated them or violated their rights. "Your voice matters," she would remind them. "By sharing your story, you can inspire change not just for yourself, but for others in our community." Maya organized community forums where residents could come together to discuss their concerns openly. These gatherings became a safe space for individuals to share their experiences and brainstorm solutions collectively. During one forum, a young mother spoke up about her struggles with her landlord, who had failed to make necessary repairs in her apartment. "I feel like I'm being ignored because I'm just one person," she said tearfully. Maya stepped forward to support her. "You are not alone," she assured her. "We are all here together, and we will stand by you." A growing movement. As word spread about the workshops and forums, more residents began participating. They realized that they were part of a larger movement advocating for tenant rights. Maya felt invigorated by this newfound energy surrounding her. Perhaps today marked not just another day struggling through life, but rather an opportunity for transformation, a chance for healing amidst shared experiences built upon kindness, compassion. With each passing event, the movement continued gaining momentum. More individuals began sharing their own stories, advocating for empathy, understanding among diverse groups everywhere. Legislative changes. The impact of Maya's advocacy extended beyond individual stories. It caught the attention of local lawmakers who recognized the need for reform in housing policies. Following discussions with community leaders, including Maya, they began drafting legislation aimed at strengthening tenant protections against discrimination and unjust evictions. Maya was invited to testify at city council meetings, where she shared her experiences and emphasized the importance of implementing policies that would protect vulnerable renters. "We need laws that hold landlords accountable," she stated passionately before council members. "No family should live in fear of losing their home simply because they're being targeted unfairly." Her testimony resonated deeply with both council members and residents present. It sparked conversations about how they could work together toward creating a more equitable housing system. Celebrating progress. As changes began taking shape, Maya organized a celebration event. In the park, where families could come together, not only to celebrate victories, but also recognize ongoing struggles within their communities. The event featured local musicians, food vendors from diverse backgrounds, and booths set up by advocacy organizations providing resources for tenants. Maya felt proud watching families gather enjoying themselves while also learning more about their rights. As she took the stage during the celebration, she addressed attendees filled with excitement. Today we celebrate our progress, but let's remember that our work isn't done yet. We must continue fighting until every family feels safe in their home. Reflecting on personal growth. On a personal level, Maya experienced profound growth throughout this journey. She learned not only about resilience, but also about the importance of vulnerability and leadership. She understood now that true strength lies not just in overcoming challenges, but also in being willing to share those experiences with others, to show them they are not alone. I've learned so much about myself, she reflected during another workshop aimed at empowering individuals facing adversity. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to ask for help when you need it. Her words resonated deeply with attendees who saw parallels between their own struggles and Maya's journey, a reminder that they too could find strength amidst adversity through acts of kindness, solidarity. Looking ahead, as Maya looked toward the future, she felt hopeful about what lay ahead. She knew there would still be challenges, but now she also understood that she wasn't alone in facing them. Inspired by those around her, she vowed to continue spreading kindness wherever possible, while advocating for understanding compassion within their community. In meetings filled with hope-determination, the group discussed ways they could continue amplifying messages centered around compassion unity while encouraging others join them in this movement. We have an opportunity here, Maya stated passionately during one brainstorming session filled with excitement. Let's make sure our voices are heard loud clear. We can create lasting change together. A legacy of change. As time passed, the legacy of Maya's fight continued influencing conversations surrounding race relations across various communities nationwide. People began sharing their own stories, sparking movements advocating for empathy, understanding among diverse groups everywhere. Maya knew that this journey was far from over. There would always be work left undone, but she felt optimistic knowing they were moving forward together, united under shared goals, striving toward equity justice. In those moments filled with connection, warmth, camaraderie, a powerful lesson emerged. Sometimes it takes one person willing to stand up against adversity, inspire others find strength within themselves too. A call to action. With each passing day, the movement continued growing stronger. More individuals joined forces rallying around shared goals, striving toward equity justice. Maya felt invigorated by this newfound energy surrounding her. Perhaps today marked not just another day struggling through life, but rather an opportunity for transformation, a chance for healing amidst shared experiences built upon kindness, compassion. As plans unfolded, the community began organizing events aimed at promoting understanding connection among residents from all walks of life, from cultural festivals celebrating diversity through workshops focused on building bridges between different groups. Maya knew that this journey was far from over. There would always be work left undone. But she felt optimistic, knowing they were moving forward together, united under shared goals, striving toward equity justice.